The Last of a Driver Breed podcast is brought to you by DaftonClassic.com. Because I daily drive my 1970 Westphalia, I know the difference between parts that will work and parts that are truly reliable. I started Dafton Classic to help those who drive classic Volkswagens get access to top quality parts for their daily drivers, their show-winning restoration projects, and everything in between. With locations in both Los Angeles, California, and Salem, Oregon, we are able to serve the VW community across the entire planet with personalized service and up-to-date technical advice that accounts for classic car ownership in the modern world. Visit us at www.daftonclassic.com. Mike's alive now. Markos.
How's it going, Brendan?
It's going.
Pleasure to have you here in my humble home.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Be part of Last of a Driving Breed. We're going to be talking about Volkswagens today because that's my kick. I'd like to introduce you, well...
Let's start with a simple question. How many Volkswagens have you had?
I've had 1, 2, 3, 4 Volkswagens. I've had... My first Beetle was a 74 Super Beetle. It was totally restored. I bought it at a car bazaar, and first day out on the road, I pull up next to another Volkswagen, and I look at it, and I see it's got different taillights, different headlights, a different windshield, and I think to myself, I bought the wrong one. I didn't have any idea that there was a difference. They all looked alike to me at that point. I just wanted one. Then I crashed it about a month after owning it, actually going to the bank to get money to go to Volkswagen Jamboree at Lion Country Center in, is it Orange County? And I hit a UPS truck on my way to the bank with my friend and totaled the front end. And that car sat in my front yard for almost 2 years. I would go out there, start the motor, drive it with a wrecked front end around the block a couple of times, just keep it alive, keep the spirit of the car alive. And then I had a friend who told me, he's like, hey, I got a Volkswagen, I'll sell it to you. And I'm thinking, I've never seen you drive. How do you have a Volkswagen? I always come and pick you up, or somebody picks you up. And he's like, I give it to you for $200. It starts, but I think it needs a valve job. And he sold it to me for $200 in a bong. And I go, and it's like white with racing stripes going down the side of it, and the interior was gutted. It was originally green, and he'd found like carpet remnants from a dumpster, and he put it in there, and the car started up, but it sounded like a jackhammer, and I didn't know what a valve job entailed, but I knew I was going to take this car home, just redo the whole thing, and take the motor out of my crash bug and put it into that car. And we ended up selling the single port 1500 that came in that 69 for like $20. And we put
$20.
for $20. Because I did.
This isn't in the last 20 years then.
No, this is 1995, or 1996 actually. And I didn't know anything about valves except that sounded like pretty extreme. And to hear that motor run, I thought, you know what, $20 for this hunk of metal that I don't know how to fix is a pretty good deal. And it'll get it out of the garage and out of the backyard, and it'll give me more room to work. And I put in the motor from the 74, which was California smog legal, with the dual heat risers and all the smog equipment on it. And I didn't find out till much, much later that was probably like the weakest, like crummiest Volkswagen motor you could possibly get, according to people that I talked to. Like, oh man, that single port 1500 was like close to 60 horsepower. The motor you put in there is like 40. Is there any truth to that? I mean, does that sound right?
Sans the smog equipment, because if you're talking the California smog stuff, that ain't gonna help you. But AS41 case, dual relief. It's not the strongest bottom end that VW made. That would have been the AS21, which is all that fuel injected stuff. But like the single port 1500s, 1600s from like the late 60s, those were probably the weakest engines, mechanically speaking.
Really?
They probably had the softest case material.
Okay.
So, smog equipment aside, which, you know, you're not smogging the car, you could have deleted all that. That's all the good stuff that I look for today is like the late 70s.
Right, some extra vacuum lines, a charcoal canister over there, a nice lunchbox size air filter.
I mean, you're not going to run the dual stacked heat risers, but an intake today is $20.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know at the time, but I thought that was a really good motor, and I spent weeks just sanding the car, ripping all the trash out of it, and those racing stripes on the side, they must have been like 2 millimeters thick worth of paint. There's a red stripe and a yellow stripe, and they came up from the front fender up along the door to up behind the rear windshield, you know. I guess it was pretty flash back in the day, but to me I was like, oh, that's got to go. I wanted to make this 69 two-tone. I had seen in like a 1994 issue of VW Trends this Swiss Beetle that was gray and white, and I said, I'm going to make my Beetle like that one. And then again, like, I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to detail back then, and once again I pulled up to another Volkswagen, and I'm like, oh, I didn't get the right headlights. I didn't get the right taillights. I still don't have the right Beetle. And I mean, I made that car two-tone. I painted it a few different colors. I got old taillights for it. I even got like a 62 deck lid that didn't latch to anything. And literally, because I worked in a metal shop at the time, I extended the bumper brackets. So it had like an RV style bumper that went back like 1.5 feet from the fenders and was great to sit on, you know, like when you're hanging out. But the car just looked ridiculous. I didn't know anything about the engines. I didn't know anything about suspension, brakes. It was just, I'm going to buy some mud flaps. Those are going to make this car awesome. You know, I'm going to buy different colored spark plug wires. I'm going to get the air filter that is on the wall at small car, because these are performance products to somebody who knows nothing about cars. I mean, hey, I'm gonna get some little skulls for the door locks. You know, I'm gonna get a green tree, and I'm gonna get a blue tree and a yellow tree air freshener, and you know, I'm just gonna go crazy with this car. And it really didn't work out for me that time, because I eventually got really tired of being either really, really hot or really, really cold, and I kind of gave up. I said, you know what? I really just want a normal car, and I sold it to my brother, and he blew the motor up doing his first valve job. I don't think he did anything except tighten all the valves all around the motor until they just touched, and he cranked it over, and it ran real rough, and he got down the street, and I didn't hear nothing for a while.
It is worth a question. Which brother?
Mario. Turbo Wario. Who's now an expert in all things turbo and mechanical. But, you know, he had to cut his teeth somewhere. And, you know, we grew up, like, just not knowing about these things. I mean, we had the Bentley manual. We had the Haynes manual. But, like, we weren't really into reading so much. So we'd experiment. Hey, let's turn this screw. You know, let's tighten this. Let's tighten that. And trial and error it. And I've had my share of just strange experiences. Like, I remember I was doing the rear brakes, and I'm looking at the cotter pin. I'm like, what is this? It's like a bobby pin. It's like for chicks. I'm going to go get a construction nail out of the coffee can in the garage, and I'm going to put that in there instead, because it's this brash, like 5-inch nail, you know, it's tough. And, you know, I hand tightened the nut, and I stuck that nail in there and bent it over. And I remember I was going to Pierce at the time, so I went to class, and my next class wasn't for a couple hours. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to Jack in the Box. I'm going to go to 7-Eleven. I'm going to go do some stuff. And I'm jetting down DeSoto, heading towards Roscoe. Next thing I know, I'm looking at the sky. And it's very surreal to just be driving and then having your view go straight to the sky. So I look out my window for like comparison, and I see this tire just taking off. And I'm like, oh no, I'm looking up because the back of my car has gone down, and there goes my tire. And my tire went down the street at about 50 miles per hour, crossed the center lane, and went head on into, like, I would say a late 80s Nissan pickup truck, and went airborne. It just karate chopped the front end of this guy's truck and took off in the air. So now I'm sparking down the road, coming to a stop. I don't even think I was braking at this point. I was just watching all this happen around me. And I see that tire go up in the air, and I'm like, oh my God, I better pull over. I applied my brakes, pulled the e-brake, I get out. Now, the guy with this wrecked truck, he's coming around because he sees me, and he parks behind me, and he jumps out, and he's like, what's going on? What is this? And I said, hold on a second, I'll be right back. So I start jogging down the street, and it almost went to Satakoy. I was almost at Roscoe. The wheel was almost at Satakoy. And, like...
For point of reference, that's about a mile.
Yeah, it was a walk, man.
I live between those two streets. It's about a mile.
Okay, so I'm pushing this tire back down the road, sweating bullets, and this guy's like, I want your insurance, I want this, I want that. And I said, yeah, no problem. Let me put this back on my car. And he's like, no, are you crazy? And I was like, I don't know, am I? Because getting this tire back on my car is like a little bit more important. I promise I won't run. So I give him my information, and at the time I was barely 18, so I was under my mom's insurance, and he's like, this isn't you. And I go, look, license is me, registration is me, I'm under my mom's insurance, don't worry about it. So I jacked the car up, I put the wheel back on, and the whole drum came off with the wheel attached to it, and the hubcap was there and everything. So like I had to sit there and struggle to get the hubcap off because I didn't have that little claw tool that goes into the holes and pry it off. I didn't have like any original equipment. I had some scissor jack out of some Nissan, and I just pieced stuff together to keep the car on the road. And I got the wheel back on and hand tightened that nut, made it about 20 yards, and I start feeling the car wobble because I'm going really slow. I'm terrified now. The metal that supports the shock in the rear end was ground down past the bolt, so like the shock is non-functional now. It's loose. And I had to stop literally every 10 meters or so and run back there and twist the nut, and I got the car home, and it was just like really nuts stuff like that would happen. I remember adjusting my carburetor one day, not knowing what I was doing. I was like, hey, there's a little screw here, there's a big screw over here, this big screw's got to do something. So I backed it out a little bit, and I drove the car around the block, and I was like, man, this feels great. And I went and picked up my girl, and we decided to go for a drive because, hey, you got an old junky car and a couple of bucks, you're driving around in it. That was something to do back in the day. I don't know what kids are doing now on their computers and their phones, but you had to go out there and experience life in my day. So we're driving through Box Canyon. We're driving through Chatsworth Lake Manor, and then I just lose power. So I go back there and looking around with my lighter, and there's this big hole in the side of my carburetor. I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And I'm thinking, what would MacGyver do, And he'd chew some gum, get the Swiss Army knife out, and I asked my girl, you got some gum? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, let's chew some. And she's like, what's wrong with your car? And I'm like, there's a hole, and we got to fill it with this gum. And we chewed gum and stuffed it in the hole, and the car started up, didn't run great, but got us back home. And, back then, this is 1997 now, 1998, we'd go to Pick Your Part. And they would have Volkswagens there quite often, People were still buying them as their first car or a commuter car, and they're cheap, and a lot of them were ending up in the junkyard. That's why they're probably so valuable now, because
so many went to the junkyard.
Yeah, they went to the junkyard and got stripped. And it was little parts like that. I'd take a bolt. Who'd want that carburetor? They took an integral part away, and just it's useless now. So those are a couple of experiences that I had. I mean, it didn't run out there. I mean, after I got rid of that car, I still had this itch. Because what I have to really tell you is how this whole Volkswagen thing got started with me. And it really goes back to my mom. In 1974, my mom and her father, my grandfather, went to a Volkswagen dealership somewhere near Westwood in Los Angeles, and she bought last year's model, a 1973 black Carmen Ghia convertible. They got a great deal on it, drove it home, and they got a phone call like the next day that they got the wrong car. So, what do you mean we got the wrong car? I said, well, we sold you a car based on another car's price. We're doing the paperwork, we're going over all the, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and yeah, that car is actually a few $1,000s more. So she took it back, and they said, here, we'll give you this car. And it was an orange, new model, 1974 Carmen Ghia, and that was like her car. And growing up, that was the car I rode in with no car seat, no seat belts. It didn't have back seats, so we'd run around in the back and like lie down underneath the speaker shelf and just let the vibrations of the car put us to sleep. And it had a very unique smell. It had this, it was different than most cars that we saw back then. Everybody I knew had like a big Ford or a Chrysler or a Lincoln or a van, a Cadillac. My mom had this weird German car, and growing up as kids, like I had a friend that said, oh man, that's a Porsche. Your mom's got a Porsche. I'm like, is that good? Like, oh yeah, Porsches are great. So this like kind of imprinted on me, like this is a special car. Even though it's not a Porsche, turns out, well, it's kind of like in the family. Porsche left his mark on all things Volkswagen and air-cooled at the time. And I couldn't wait to grow large enough to drive this car. Because eventually getting into the front seat, you don't see anything. You see a dash and fur and stuff underneath it. And when I was about 14, my mom sold the car. She sold it for $2,400. A man came and just handed her the money, took the key, signed some paperwork, and left. She sold that car in less than 5 minutes. No haggling over the price. The guy knew he was getting an original. And it was like 1987, because I remember my mom took that money and bought a brand new Hyundai XL GL, baby blue, 4-door hatchback. And that was probably one of the worst cars ever made.
So I don't want to interrupt the story, but
sure.
About the XL. My mom had an XL before I was born. And the story I got was they used Honda interiors to the point where the steering wheel had a Honda logo in the steering wheel.
We thought it was a Honda. I told everybody my mom bought a Honda. And I don't know if it was the same guy who told me.
Did you know it was a Hyundai, or were you trying to upsell it as a Honda, or did you not?
No. I just Hyundai. Why would I differentiate the two? I wasn't even like into cars that much. I just, wanted my mom's old car. I didn't know if it was a Volkswagen or a Porsche. Let's just say, I wasn't the brightest kid ever, and because my parents weren't born in this country. Like, they weren't into cars and music and things that define American culture. They have their own culture. They have their own music, their own food. They're Greek. My family comes from Greece, so, while my neighbors were listening to Led Zeppelin, my parents were listening to folk music. Or, I couldn't even tell you the genre, but... like, it was just, I just thought it was a Honda, because Honda was around long before Hyundai. You know what I mean? Toyota, how are you going to mess that up?
And in 1987, this is when the Japanese cars were really starting to get good.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the American cars at the time.
Yeah, I think the Prelude was around at that time, and that was like a really fancy car.
Supra was around at that time.
Yeah, my uncle had one.
The pickup was the pickup to have at this time.
My uncle had, I don't know if it was a 78 or a 79 Celica Supra. It had both designations and it had a little swan on it. It was 4 different colors of brown, and it had these slanted headlights. I thought it was like a race car. I thought it was a really fancy car, and he would drive it fast. And then here's my mom with this Hyundai, and I said, I'm going to bring the Volkswagen back. I'm going to get it. And I was rebelling at that time, so I was into skateboarding, surfing, bodyboarding, like the beach scene. And, without mass media at the time, you only got glimpses of it, so you knew Volkswagen was there. Like, people had Volkswagen buses and Beetles, and they were at the beach, and young people type things, And so I said, I'm going to get a Volkswagen, and that's how it really started with the 74. My first car was a 76 Datsun pickup, and it was all original. It had a little camper shell on it, and
620.
I couldn't tell you. All I knew was it was
just a Datsun pickup, single cab.
1976 was the year of manufacture. It was made in Tennessee. I remember when I got it, I sat there with the owner's manual, turning it page by page, trying to figure out what everything was. It smelled old, and like Volkswagens, there's all kinds of stuff raining down from the original seats, like fibers, and I thought it was like grass. They stuffed the seats with some kind of grass.
I've got a buddy back home who he's all sorts of into Datsuns.
Yeah, I was like, Datsun, Nissan? Nissan is Datsun? Datsun, Nissan?
Datsun
what?
by Nissan.
Yeah, absolutely. So even though I had this pretty cool truck that drove well and was well maintained and all original, I still wanted a Volkswagen. And then after my hiatus from Volkswagen, my brother Mario, at that time he must have had like 6 cars on hand. And he was working on his 67 Nova, and my buddy Jacob had just gotten his driver's license, and his grandparents gave him a Toyota Corona. And they were the original owners. He drove it for a couple of weeks and ended up wrecking the car. And his mom had a 72 Beetle. And I remember he had the Riviera rims on it, and it had a custom plate, said One Fun Bear. And she gave him the car. She's like, here, drive this. I'm just going to pretty much take everything you have in the bank and go buy myself a new car. And we would just rib him for that license plate. And he went and got regular plates, and then he decided that, you know what? He's going to customize this car. So he wanted to get the Mulholland kit with the square headlights and the square tail lights and the whale tail. And I said, dude, that kit in itself is a testament to bad taste, in my opinion. And just don't do it. Don't do it. And he's like, well, okay, fine. I trust your judgment, but I'm still going to get like 3-inch wider fenders. And at the time, just down the street off of Corbin and Nordhoff, just off of a side street there by Del Taco, there was Dick Landley Industries. And they made a supercharger for Volkswagens, for flat 4 motors. So, the internet was just barely creeping into homes at this point. So this was kind of like looking at the back of magazines, like, where is this place? Where is this place? Where is this place? Oh my God, this place is in Northridge? So he drove down there and he's like, this is my car. What can you put on it? So they sold him a supercharger for a 1600. He put it on there, and I remember he bought headers and a Eurotuck exhaust, the little twin mufflers that went up high. And he would floor it, and the car would dance. His wheels would hop, and it would go. And it would scream. And eventually, one muffler came off. Then the other muffler came off, and he was just running it with headers. And then the headers started to disintegrate. They blew off. I remember we were just at Mason and Victory in front of Pierce College. I was behind him in my Nissan, and some old man and his grandson pulled up next to him in a Porsche Boxster convertible. Hey, it's a Porsche. Starts revving his motor. And I'm like, oh no, dude, that's like some old guy and a kid. What are you doing? But then the old guy, he looks at him and gives him a nod, and he starts revving it. And they take off, and I see chunks of metal flying out from underneath my friend Jacob's car. And it was his exhaust. It just got blown off by like the heat and the pressure coming out of this motor. And I think that motor lasted 3 weeks of him just whomping on it every chance he got, every car that he felt intimidated by or just wanted a challenge out of spite. He killed that motor. And just down the street, there was a guy that we went to high school with. Him and his brother, they got into Volkswagens. And they had old, cool, like patinaed Volkswagens. And one of the brothers wrapped his car around a pine tree on the S-curve on Nordhoff between DeSoto and Mason. And the other brother flipped out. He was like, I don't want to drive this car anymore. And he had just bought an 1835 with dual carbs and all new stuff, but the rest of the car was like a trash can. And my buddy Jacob bought the car for like $1,500 just for the motor, because in his opinion the car wasn't worth anything, and he was going to give it to my brother Mario for helping him do all the other stuff on his Bug. And I was like, well, you know, man, my brother, he's got a lot of cars. Why don't you just let me have the shell? I'll pay you for it. I'll give you $600. And he was like, no, man, no, it ain't cool. I'm going to give it to your brother because your brother's like my mechanic and he doesn't ask for anything, and I want to give it to him. And I was like, give him the $600. He'll be stoked. And he's like, nah, man, I'm going to give him the car. And I really think it was just, he just didn't want to give me the car. And he gave it to my brother, and my brother went to a little spot next to Pick Your Part off of Tuxford and got a motor that ran out of some impounded Volkswagen for like $400, put it in the car and just started driving it around. But the front end was so rusty and rotted out that the fenders were held to the front apron with shoelaces. And they weren't new shoelaces. I mean, these shoelaces were cut over and over by this rusty metal and just tied together in knots again and then moved to different holes in the rust, because you could see like where it had been pulling on the metal, and the front end was totally rotted. It had zero interior. It did have seats that were almost upholstered and a GT steering wheel. A little...
What makes seats almost upholstered?
There was still some of that grass attached to them. And like you could see the springs and the grass, and the story gets better because I said I have to have this car. So my brother's like, I'll sell it to you for $1,200, you know? And I'm like, $1,200? You only put $400 into it. And he's like, yeah, but I heard you try to buy it from under me for $600, so I'm gonna have to tax you on that. And I was like, man, okay, you got it. So I bought the car from him, and I didn't even have the $1,200. I think I gave him like $50 with a promise to pay every payday, like what I could until I owed him. And like I even started writing receipts, and it was a struggle, but I got possession of the car, and then once it was paid off, oh man, I just went crazy. I went and bought fenders. We bought an apron. My brother cut off the old apron in the front or front clip, put a new one on, and we didn't have a welder, so he used a a propane torch and some coat hangers and kind of brazed the metal together. And luckily there's two big bolts that kind of hold it in place. That was like our guideline. We bolted it on, cut the metal away around it, kind of like soldered it together, and put fenders on. And then it was just, let's primer it. Let's have fun with the car, you know. And I remember taking the seats out. I pulled off the seat covers, turned them inside out, and sewed them back together, like a real Frankenstein job. And I remember going into my parents' closet and taking anything I could find that was corduroy, because I knew they weren't wearing corduroy anymore, and polyester, and I went and just folded it all up and put it on top of the springs, and then turned these seat covers right way out, and they were button snaps. They weren't hog ringed on, and I was like, okay, this is gonna work. Knocked the dust off of them, sewed them back together, put all my parents' hand-me-downs in there, and I had seats, upholstered seats. They didn't look great. I mean, there were still spots where you could see the white threading underneath the vinyl that used to be there, but they were kind of whole. And I got red carpet remnants, and I thought that was pretty cool. And we started putting stickers on the ceiling because there was no headliner or anything like that. And I just started pricing stuff out. I was glued to the SoCal Imports catalog at the time, which was a little funny because they had a separate book with prices. So you'd be sitting in the bathroom for like an extra 20 minutes drooling over parts, but you didn't know how much they cost until you went back to the desk and pulled out the pricing guide and wrote down the serial numbers and the costs. And I didn't know how things worked back then, so I remember saving up like $600. I had my crib sheet of all the part numbers and how much they cost, and I drove out to Paramount from the San Fernando Valley, which at the time was kind of a long drive. And I walked into SoCal Imports and I said, okay, I want this. And they're like, okay, it'll be about 4 weeks. And it didn't make any sense to me. I said, for what? I'm here. I have cash. I can pay for it all at once. I don't have to make payments. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, well, I just want the stuff. And they, well, we order it and then we ship it to you. I'm like, why do you have a store? I came here to buy this stuff.
They still do that today.
You know?
Not that I should speak to that.
But
doing what I do.
I tell you what, man, I got what I could. I remember I got a degreed pulley. I thought that was totally awesome. I bought velour door panels, which I just really did not like at all. I thought it was something exclusive to lowriders, and I was kind of more of like a hot rod. I'm going to hot rod my Volkswagen, and this lowrider interior was kind of there, so I bought it, and it was on sale for like $40 instead of the $60 that a stock kit came with, and bought some door handles, fender beading, and that was it. They didn't have the shifter I wanted. They didn't have the carpet kit. They didn't have the headliner. They didn't have a lot of stuff, man. So I remember, okay, so I got this stuff and I still got cash. So I bought Hot VWs at this point. Because VW Trends, I will say, was eye candy for kids that, or young adults or adolescents that like cars because they had bikini girls on the cover. Mm-hmm. And that really sold the magazine. I'm like, that one has a car. This one has an attractive young lady in a bikini. So now I'm kind of like, well, I'm building this car. And I think at that point, VW Trends was on its way out. I mean, I wasn't even, I couldn't even find it if I wanted to. So okay, so
it's fine, dude. Don't sweat it.
So I remember I had the money and I was buying VW Trends at the time, and there was a car show coming up. It was California Classic or something to that extent. I can't remember exactly what it was, But I wrote down the address. I got out a Thomas Guide, and I found it, and I drove out there, and they said, just drive in. I said, well, where do I park? I said, go park next to the cars. Now, I'd been to a couple Volkswagen shows at the Lion Country Center, the Jamborees, like spring and summer. And if you weren't there early, if you didn't have a show car, you weren't in. You went in to see 50, 60 really, really nice cars, and then all the other cool Volkswagens were out in this parking lot.
Right. You went and parked at the trucks.
Yeah, and I thought that was really weird, and here I am where they're just like, hey, pull in. So I'm driving my Heap that was like almost sanded down to bare metal. I didn't realize I had one red door that was a 64 door, and one door that was yellow that was year appropriate for this 1965 Beetle. I don't think I even mentioned that. This is my 65 Beetle that I've owned now for 20 years.
Is this the same one?
It's the same car.
Same one you have now?
Same car I have now.
Oh, wow.
So I got my car 20 years ago from my brother for $1,200 after trying to steal it out from under him from a friend.
Even hip to this. Okay.
Yeah, I did have a 63 Carmen Ghia that I worked on for a little bit, but I just happened to start dating my wife, and that got really serious, and my parents were like, you haven't touched that car in 2 years. And I'm like, oh, no, I do stuff. I go out there and dream. And they're like, well, that's not good enough. We want to do something with the garage, get the car out of there. And I sold that car for $100 to a man who just needed a motor. But I needed to get the car out of there. I bought it for $200, and the front end was just demolished. So I'd cut the front end off, and I'd bought a Phoenix kit, or was it Mark 7, Mark 3 fiberglass. I bought a one-piece Carmen Ghia front end kit, and I put it on. But then, like, there's fabrication issues that I wasn't able to solve. Like, how am I going to put working headlights in? I'm going to cut holes out. What goes behind there? I didn't know how to fiberglass. I didn't know how to do a lot of stuff. So I had my 65, and I didn't feel bad getting rid of the 63 Ghia. That's my 1, 2, 3, 4 Volkswagens. And so back to the story, I've got my 65 now, and I go out to the show, and I'm like, oh, wow, everything is here. I got all the rest of the pieces for my car. I got the body molding, I got taillight lenses, rings, bulbs, wires. I mean, whatever was on my shopping list for SoCal Imports, I got at this show. And I had friends over that summer helping me sand the car all the time because it would start rusting all the time. And I remember renting a paint booth and going out there and primering it. So I'm going to take it to Earl Scheib now. They're going to paint this car for $99, $95, you know. And I take it to Earl Scheib, and they're like, we can't paint your car. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's ready to go. I primered it. And I'm like, your primer is like 60 grit sandpaper, dude. You do not know how to paint. And I'm like, well, yeah, I've never painted before. That's why I went to this place out by the Burbank airport that used to rent time. And I borrowed a spray gun, and I found a place in Reseda that would actually sell me like professional primer and all the stuff you had to mix with it. And so once again, everybody's sanding my car, and I take it back to Earl Scheib, and for $359, they agreed to paint the outside and the inside. They would paint my dash. They would paint the door jambs and the doors and everything that would show. Mm-hmm. And I explained to them, you don't have to worry about the back because that's going to have like this headliner that comes down. So it's just the doors, around the windshield in the front, the dash all the way down to the floor. And I got it painted an Apollo blue, which appeared to be like a very dark bluish green in daylight, but under like the parking lot lights, the arc sodium, the car looked green. So that was like a weird thing. Like it looked green at night when I'm driving around under street lights, and it looked blue during the day. I thought that was kind of cool. And now I happen to get a set of dual Weber 40 IDFs, and I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to put these on the car once it's painted. So I get the car painted. I put in the headliner, put in the carpet, new Cal-Look rubber. I bought aluminum trim, and I had aluminum running boards. I got Porsche emblem hubcaps that actually said Porsche and Stuttgart from some sneaky Chinese lady who said, these are the best counterfeit you will buy, $25 each. And she told me they're like the last 4 that she had. And if I didn't buy them right now, I'd never see them again. And I believed her, so I gave her $100 for those hubcaps. And she's like, you nice guy, I give you a 5th one free. And I'm like, you said these are the last 4. And she's like, well, this is my sample. You can have the sample because they don't exist. And it had a little dent in it, and I was like, okay, this is cool, you know, I got an extra one. Put that up on the wall as soon as I got home, before I did anything. Porsche emblem hubcap on the wall. And now my car's complete. I've got it painted. The interior's done. It looks great. Smells terrible. It smells like paint, you know. But I'm like, finally I'm complete. And 2 weeks later, I'm cruising down to the beach. I have a great time just driving around. I didn't stop. I was just driving my car, having a great time. And I got back into the valley. And I was on Satakoy in Canoga Park, just coming up on DeSoto. And I look in my rearview mirror, and it's nighttime. Now, I think maybe I'm having some kind of a flashback. Like the hallucinogenics have come back to haunt me, because there's no way I'm seeing nighttime out of my back window and daytime out of the front. So I look out the window like I did when my tire came off, and my car's on fire. The reason I'm seeing black is because there's all this smoke coming out of my car. So my initial reaction is to floor it. So the car takes off and then just sputters out. I thought I could outrun the fire, dude. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, I just got my car painted. I don't want it to burn forward. I want it to burn back. The engine's in the back. It's not going to burn anything. So the car eventually stalls out.
Birthday candle, just blow it out.
Yeah, right? I pull over, and the heat was unbearable back there. There's nothing I could do except scream, help, help, help me, please help me. And, you know, I remember like my days in Boy Scouts, run for help. So I start knocking on doors, I'm banging on people's windows, fire, fire, my car's on fire. And I remember, like, in some instances, you could see inside the house, and people are just sitting there like, this guy's crazy. You know, and I'm not going to sit there and explain to them. I'm going door to door, yelling fire. And some guys down the street, they're building a wall in someone's front yard. They come running down the street like a bucket brigade. Everybody's got 2 buckets with this really nice cement water, and they start dousing my car. And they put the fire out. Thank God. And I'm looking at it, and I just couldn't help myself. I open up the deck lid, and I see that the fire had started on the driver's side carburetor. And I bought this T-fitting to split the fuel line that would shrivel up if it was exposed to extreme temperatures. And I think that's what really saved my car, because the fuel line shriveled up, and it only burned what was in the carburetor and what had shot out of the fuel line up until the point where it just turned into this nice weird looking like mace, like this ball attached to this line. And I was like, oh, this isn't too bad. I think the car's gonna make it. Then the fire department shows up, and I'm like, oh no, oh my God, they're here. Nobody said they were going to call. Everybody looked at me like I was crazy, you know? These guys helped me out and said, is this your car? And I was like, yeah. I was like, did you call us? And I said, no. No, I did not. I was yelling for help because my car was on fire. They put it out. I appreciate you guys coming out here, because I know that you will have to pay a bill if the fire department comes out and does anything for you, in most cases. So I never got the bill. I guess that was pretty legitimate on my part, you know, like I didn't say call the fire department. I was just like, the sky is falling, you know, I'm Chicken Little. I'm freaking out over here. My car is on fire. So my car is not on fire anymore. It's drenched in cement and water. And I start walking home. I walk for about 25 minutes. I get to my mom's house, and I'm like, Mom, my car caught on fire. Oh my God, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. But we need to get the car. And she's like, where is it? And I'm like, a couple blocks away. It seemed like a couple of blocks. It was probably like a mile and a quarter. And we called AAA. They came and they picked up the car. They drove it to the house, and I took off the manifold, and I got a shop vac out because there's water in there. I vacuumed out the ports and went in the garage. I put stock manifold and my 34 pick carb on there. I had a ton of fuel line left, so ran the fuel line and car started right up. And I boned out. I just started driving the car that day after it caught on fire. Within an hour of getting it home, I was back on the road. And I didn't go far. I went to 7-Eleven. I got like a big gulp and a hot dog, and I came back, and my parents were like, did you just drive that car that caught on fire? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, but it caught on fire. And I go, I know it stinks, but it runs really good. You know, it's a strong car. And I'm like, you're crazy. I'm like, no, just very weird, right? So that was a really like, you know, neat experience. And then I remember not too long later, people would come up to me like, hey, do you want to sell the car? And I'm like, why would I want to sell the car? It's like, oh, I see it caught on fire. You know, don't you want to sell it? It's probably not safe. And I was like, I'll sell it to you for 10 grand. 10 grand? What do you got in that thing, man? 2 liter? And I'm like, no. It's just, I really don't want to sell it. But if you want to give me $10,000 right now, you can have it. And at that time, it was like early 2000s. You can go buy a really nice Volkswagen for, you know, 5-6 grand already fixed up. I mean, I remember the concept. One new Beetle was really jacking up the market for vintage Volkswagen because they were like, oh no, Volkswagen's back. They got a Beetle. Let's go get one. Mm-hmm. Let's go buy an old one. So, I mean, 5-6 grand for a Volkswagen in early 2000 was actually a lot because a few years earlier, you're looking at 11, 12. I mean, you're still finding Beetles for $600-700 running. Original owners just like, oh, too old. You look like you could appreciate it, you know? But I never sold it. And I remember my girlfriend and her brother were over one day, and I was like, you know, let me do my brakes real quick. Now, you'd think I'd learned my lesson working on brakes and stuff, but here's another funny story about wheels coming off the car. I did the brakes, and they're kind of rushing me. Like, her brother had to go to work, and he was a big guy. He probably weighed in somewhere around 450 pounds. He was one of the biggest people I've ever met at the time, and he rode my Volkswagen. It was not a problem. And I was in a rush, and I guess I didn't tighten the lug nuts on the driver's side wheel. And we got on the 101 at Winnetka, and I'm like, look at how strong my car is. And started doing 60, 65, 70, 75, and the car just started vibrating violently. And I didn't understand what was going on. So I started slowing the car down, and the wobble became more pronounced, and I pulled over just past the Tampa on-ramp, and I get out of the car, and my front driver's side wheel is just kind of cambered really funny, and I'm like, did something break? This is so weird. So I look, and the whole thing is just floating there. The bolts that hold the rim on were all there, and the hubcap kept it on, and my girlfriend's brother worked as a lever by putting all the weight on the passenger side tire stabilized the vehicle enough for when that wheel came loose, it just floated around in the wheel well. And this was before cell phones. Well, not before cell phones, but before they were pretty common. I think we had pagers back then. We just kind of humped it down the side of the freeway and called my house. People used to know telephone numbers back then. I don't know if kids listening to this might know that, but we used to memorize stuff. I called my house and said, "Hey, Dad, I need a jack." Because I had her brother lift the car. I mean, he had the power, but it's like a millimeter short from making any threads meet. And I said, "Dad, I need you to bring a jack." And he's like, "Where are you?" "I'm on the freeway." "How are you calling me from the freeway?" I'm like, I'm not on the freeway anymore. We walked down to a payphone, and we need you to bring me the jack. We had a big floor jack at this time. And he brings me the floor jack, and I jack up the car and put the wheel on and put the jack in his truck and take off. And doing 70, 75, 80, because I have to prove to these kids that these cars work. They will get you places, and they will do the speed limit and beyond. And I really wanted to show off to her brother because I kind of wanted him to get a bug. I was trying to get everybody I knew to buy a Volkswagen because I had one, my brother had one, our friend Jacob had one. We got our friend Jared into Volkswagens. He got a Volkswagen. And then there's like this club called Airspeed that we'd occasionally drop in and check out their cars and stuff, but they were kind of like an elite group at that time. They were just building show quality cars, and they didn't want a lot of people to join their club unless they were very serious about the build. And we're kind of like these like rat rod guys. We're just piecing these cars together, trying to make them look great, but restoring a vehicle to like vintage status was not in our universe. We didn't have money close to that. We just wanted to kind of get a little bit of performance out of them. And that car caught on fire, wheel came off. I was no stranger to that. It happened on my 69, and I just kept driving this car. So years and years roll by. I've put 80,000 miles on this junkyard motor. After the fire, I decided to be artistic and paint the car any way I wanted. I painted it black and red and green, black and white, black and gray, different variations of two-tone paint jobs where it was just the fenders, then just the hood, the deck lid, and the roof, and I got into pinstriping, so I started pinstriping the car and doing logos on the doors, and it just became a canvas, like a way to express myself and whatever I was into. I remember History Channel did World War II in color, so I painted my signature shark teeth on the bumper, the front bumper, because my mom wasn't a very good parallel parker, and she messed up the chrome. I'm not going to go buy a new bumper. Are you kidding me? I'll just paint it. Look at the rest of the car. It's just evolution. It's evolving, It's what I feel like at that time in my life. And it got to the point where the car just, for some reason, felt like it was getting faster and faster. Now, in my heart of hearts, I was attributing this to some supernatural powers. Like, I love this car so much, there's like a demon inside, and it's making it stronger. But what it was the cylinders were kind of getting glazed, and oil was getting past the rings, and my combustion chambers were getting smaller and smaller. So it was getting like more and more compression. And it got to the point where we went to the Irwindale drag races, and people were coming up to me and saying, "Dude, turn your car off. Turn your car off." I mean, it's 5 a.m., the gates aren't open yet, it's dark, everybody's sitting in the parking lot idling, getting 2 inches closer and closer to that gate, and they're like, "Turn your car off, man, we're dying." So that's when I decided I'm going to rebuild my own engine. I had the technology now with the internet, and this is now, it's like 2015, and I got How to Hot Rod Your Volkswagen, the book, and I just read it from cover to cover, I read the manual from cover to cover. Every opportunity I had on YouTube was watching people like VW Darren and Easy Jeezy and whoever else YouTube suggested to me that was doing some kind of rebuild. And I watched people like in Michigan in their basements with coal burning stoves doing these rebuilds in sub-zero temperatures, you know, just like, hey, this is how I'm doing it, compared to people in Florida with open garages and professional parts. And I watched what everybody did. And I even watched some people do some Porsche rebuilds to see what like the thinner way to do it would be, you know, like the finer way, the thinner things. And I said, okay, I can do this. And I started ordering parts left and right from whoever had them in stock all over the country, including some special tools like spring press for the valves, so I can get the valves out, honing tool for the cylinders. I bought this tool to measure the journals to see if the case has been bored, and I got a new cam and lifters from Engel because I found out they were making the lifters in Oxnard at John Deere, and you know, rebuild kit from who knows where. And I was just watching these parts come in slowly, and then came the day where, okay, I'm going to tear this motor out of the car and find out what the mystery is. And when I finally took it apart, I was like, what? That's it? Where's all the springy things and the hard stuff? You know, it wasn't. You know, like reading it and watching it and then actually doing it physically, you're like
into the zone, and you're on that.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, this is gonna be a breeze, dude. And all I wanted to do was freshen the motor up, and when I took the heads off, it looked like somebody had put German chocolate cake in there. It was, the combustion chamber was almost non-existent. It was just filled in with carbon. And I went to work. I scraped at it with wire brushes, and then eventually attached some of those wire balls and brushes to a drill, and carefully went in there and cleaned it out. And I pulled the pistons apart, and I'm like, oh wow, these aren't any brand I've ever heard of. They got this little K and S on there. What is this, you know? And I look up Volkswagen pistons KS. It's like Kolbenschmidt. I said, fancy. So, okay, got the internet now, so I got these Kolbenschmidt pistons. I ain't buying nothing forged or new. I got some German stuff that they don't even sell out here. This is cool, right? And then I look up my case number, and it's like, I'm not seeing it printed anywhere. And I have to go on the internet, and I find out that the designation is just like, these were made by Volkswagen for rebuilds. They were never actually made for their production line. They were made for rebuilding motors. And there were these dual relief cases that could either be 1300 cc or 1600 cc. So I was like, oh my God, what if I had a 1300 cc this whole time with dual ports? You know, like if they even exist, because I didn't even...
They actually do in Europe.
Right. So I was like, oh my God, that would be like a trip. So I started cleaning the pistons, and I mean, I bought the chem dip, and I was just sitting there with a stopwatch, bro. Like, I cannot go over so many minutes because these are like cast parts. Don't know if they're forged or not. And I was using like these big safety pins, like you see the cats at In-N-Out Burger wearing on their aprons, to clean where the oil rings went in, and just every little bit of that motor, I went over it with like a pick. You know what I mean? And people were like, oh, you got to pressure wash it, you got to do this. I was using like Palmolive soap and Goho and lava soap and whatever I could find, just cleaning it. Simple Green. I used a lot of Simple Green. And what was it? A Shark steamer to do the push rods and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And just I cleaned it in my backyard, and I had all these like tubs and bins like from Target and Ziploc bags and Sharpies, and I just started putting everything in little bags and cleaning everything, and then I was ready to start putting it back together, and I put it back together, started it up, and revved it for 15 minutes at 2,000 RPMs to break in that new cam, and it's like, all right, done. Let's do this, And my brother's like, you got to break it in. And I'm like, but do I really have to break it in? Because the pistons and stuff, they got room, dude. They kind of glazed the original cylinder walls, and we honed it. So there's that grip, but...
Did you put new rings on?
Yeah, we put new rings. I remember
Okay.
I took extreme pleasure in orienting the gaps at 11, 12, and 1 o'clock.
Oh, you're one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember my wife had a food scale.
Not going 11, 4, 1, 8.
No, maybe I did. Maybe I just don't remember because it was so long ago. But it was kind of important because there's like these little tips, like when you put the connecting rods together, you gotta peen it. You gotta take a little. I used a finishing nail. What would you call that thing? Like, it was like, it's a piece of metal that's tapered, and you use it to hammer in finishing nails because they don't have a head on them. And I used that to peen it, put a little dimple in it so that it would lock it in place. And I said, okay, you know what, I'll drive it around as much as I can to break in the motor. And then we're going to go to Irwindale.
The Last of a Drive and Breed podcast is brought to you by DaftonClassic.com. Because I daily drive my 1970 Westfalia, I know the difference between parts that will work and parts that are truly reliable. I started Dafton Classic to help those who drive classic Volkswagens get access to top quality parts for their daily drivers, their show-winning restoration projects, and everything in between. With locations in both Los Angeles, California, and Salem, Oregon, we are able to serve the VW community across the entire planet with personalized service and up-to-date technical advice that accounts for classic car ownership in the modern world. Visit us at www.daftonclassic.com.
Again, it was like some time had gone past. I said, all right, so here's the test. Going up the 210, full throttle. Let's do this. So go up the 210 full throttle, wrap the speedometer, and at this point I'm using
Wrap to the speedometer going uphill.
wrap the speedometer going uphill
Okay.
with Weber 40 IDF, the Bosch 009 distributor,
Oh my
and 1600 with Colvin Schmidt pistons, and angle 110 cam and lifter and high rev springs. And I was like, yeah, this is great. And when we get to the show, I open up the deck lid. I notice there's like this little fine rainbow mist of oil on the deck lid. And I was like, that's kind of weird. Maybe it's because I really pushed it. Motor was probably just blowing out anything it could, But then I started noticing that it was still there. So I wipe it off and it would come back. So I remember I called our friend Walker. I said, man, I'm getting this oil coming out from behind my pulley. And I was reading on the Samba that Empey had released some degreed pulleys that weren't threaded the right way. So instead of pushing air into the case, they're pulling oil out.
For those who don't know, the evaporation system for getting the oil fumes out of the engine, the pulley on the crank is an air pump.
Yeah.
It pumps air in, and then it goes out the oil fill tower. And
Right,
then
into your carburetor,
into a
through the air
carburetor
filter.
to get burned.
Yeah, so, I'm like, Walker.
It's very common for engine, if you're building an engine for like a Baja or a sandrail, guys seal that up. But factory, that's supposed to be open, just sort of like an open air. And yeah, well, MP had a run of those pulleys that were not grooved correctly, so they didn't actually pump air in.
Yeah, and
they're supposed to.
I'd ask some people like, "Hey, man, have you heard about this?" And they're like, "I don't know, man. Maybe you just should get a sand seal, you know?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm just trying to fix a problem here. I'm not trying to introduce a new system to my engine, especially one that's as intrusive as that, you know?" So I call up Walker. I'm like, "Dude, you got any degree pulleys? 5-hole, maybe in blue, red?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got one right here." I'm like, "How much?" Like, "I give it to you for $10." I'm like, "All right, I'm on my way." So I go over there, and he's got this big giant crescent wrench. We adjust it to fit, and take the pulley off, and I start putting the new one on, and he's like, "Dude, I think you got a bigger problem." And I'm like, "What is it?" And he's like, there's metal smeared into the threads on the pulley." And I was like, "Oh, that's always been there." And he's like, "That's not normal." And I'm like, "It's not? I thought maybe, you know, some debris got in there and just got mushed in." He's like, "No, this is your case. Your case has been smeared into the pulley. You've got a bigger issue. See if the pulley goes up and down." And I go, "You mean my end play?" He's like, "No, that's in and out. See if it goes up and down." I was like, "Okay." And I went over there and it's duck, 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 duck. It moved enough to make a sound. And he's like, "Stop driving your car. Something is wrong." And I was like, "Nothing can be wrong, okay? Because I bought the same bearings that I took out. You know what I mean? I bought standard on the crank, cut once on the case. Simple as that." "Bro, did you measure the crank?" "Why would I do that? I'm just replacing stuff. It was supposed to be a really quick refresh the motor and maybe upgrade the cam type deal, you know?" Like, "You better check it." So I took it home and tore the engine apart, and I mic'd the crank, and it was cut once. It had been milled, and I'd put 80,000 miles on a motor that had this stock crank floating around in there. Now, this brings into mind some nuances that my engine has that is quite unique, in that my distributor would never sit deep enough, and my fuel pump would never get enough stroke to run normally. I mean, if it was cool, if I wasn't driving it far, the car drove great. But if I ever drove far or got the car hot, it would stop pumping gas.
I've been there.
And I'd have problems in the past with my distributor popping out and smearing the gear at the bottom, or the teeth that go into the distributor drive gear. So I bought a billet clamp. I'm like, "This will hold it down. This isn't some stamped metal that could possibly pop because I am a high-performance driver," you know? And now it all made sense. With that crank floating around in there, it was mashing the distributor drive gear up and down. That explained why the brass gear on the crank was always milled down, and why there's always sparkly, you know, brass particles in my oil. And it also explained why I had to mill down my distributor to get it to sit, and why I had to mill down the pedestal that the fuel pump sat on with an orbital sander. I milled it down like 2 millimeters so I could actually see the rod go past the gaskets. I mean, I was running it without gaskets. I don't know how that car ran for so long with just these little things going on, but I was a very adaptive person. Car breaks down, keep junking it so you can build stuff to save your day, you know? And to this day now, I have like a toolkit and wires and fuses and gaskets, and under the seat you might find a shifter or a coil or something that someone might need. Shoot, I might need it. And yeah, you know, so I take the motor apart and I say, I can't use the same crank. I don't feel comfortable. So I bought the Scat forged, counterweighted deal, and I'm like, this is going to make a huge difference now, because then I could drive it at like 4,000 RPMs for way longer than I felt comfortable before, because got this really tough crank now. And everybody's like, you going to use the same case? Uh-huh. Why? Because I have it, and it's, it's my car. If it blows up, it catches on fire, that's par for the course, man. That's what I signed up for, a little bit of adventure, like, I'm not getting groceries in this thing. I'm driving it for no reason. I'm driving it to just be driving it. It's not like I bought this car because it's economic. It's not because of any other reason. It's just this obsession that stemmed from my mom getting rid of a car when I was a kid. And it's like, maybe I should go see a psychiatrist, but I like it too much to give it up. It's an addiction now, and yeah, so I'm going to use old stuff until it's totally obliterated, and then I have to get new stuff. I think that's the best way to do it for me. I mean, I tell my daughter, one day you're going to get this car, and she's kind of like, okay, I'll paint it purple, I paint it pink, I paint it green. You can paint it whatever color you want. All you have to do is learn how to drive standard and have Auto Club. And if you have it after I've passed away, go on the internet. You can do anything now. You don't need that many tools for a Volkswagen. They're pretty light. And I mean, I've done like my brakes, my brake lines. I've rebuilt the brake cylinder, or the slave cylinders on the actual wheels. Mm-hmm. I did the headliner, I've done the carpet. I mean, I go in there, and I had the electrical redone years back because I had several electrical fires. Those are kind of neat. And the mechanics that did the work, they were at DeYoung's Automotive. I used to work there as a AAA tow truck driver. And, I said, hey guys, if I get this kit, it's a complete wiring harness, can you put it in for me? They're like, yeah, absolutely. What they pulled out of that car was like partially the original wiring harness. Then there was like sections of like aluminum foil wrapped in duct tape. There were like appliance wires being used inside the wiring harness. And they're like, I can't believe this car ran. I can't believe it just didn't completely burn down. This is pretty amazing. And they redid everything, and they put different amp fuses. And I thought that was like, why'd you guys use different amp fuses? The diagram says that they're all the same amps. And they're like, well, this isn't a 1965 Beetle anymore. This is Frankenstein. And you're not running a voltage regulator, you're not running this, you're not running that, you're running an alternator now, and you're running halogen headlights, so trust us. This is what we're going to do. I trusted them, and I think their work is good, but I've had like some melting in my fuse box and some distortion, so I went back to the lower amp fuses, so if it starts getting super hot, let it blow.
Yeah.
I've got a glove box full of them. All different colors. I got your reds, I got your whites, which I need to use the most. The white ones, those are what I should be using. I got some blues.
What the bugs usually use are those white 8 amps.
And I mean, I had so much distortion in the actual fuse block that one of the connectors broke. And, I'm like, why aren't my headlights working? This is so weird. Well, I found that there was a short inside the headlight bucket where it was arcing against the body, and we fixed that, and then we realized that the wire going all the way back to the fuse had melted the insulating like sleeve, so we cut that away. And I'm like, oh man, you think it's still good? Yeah, it's still good. Just put another sleeve on it. I got some of that shrink wrap we can put on there, and go to the fuse block, and like, you know what, I'll just chop up a connecting end, and shoved it in there and tapped it in so it, filled the brake. And I'm my electrical is good again. Until next time, you know? And I'm kind of grateful that I'm older now and I've got other cars to drive, so I don't have to, put myself in the line of fire as often as I used to. But I know there's like this, sense of adventure and danger every time I get inside that car. It can go either way, and as long as it's going forward and it's going fast, I think I'm going in the right direction.
It reminds me so much of Evelyn. My 72. I don't know if you ever saw my 72. But Evelyn's my first car. Evelyn's the car that I had. I tried out running oil leak once. when I saw.
Why not?
I wasn't supposed to be driving the car that day. I was still living with my folks and still under their thumb, and they're like, "No, you don't get to drive." I'm like, "Hey, they're not home. I'm gonna go drive my car. I'm gonna go drive it to school."
Yep.
And coming back home from school, there's a pull up to the bridge. First gear, second gear, third gear, gunning it over the bridge. Come back down into West Salem. Come up to the first stoplight, and there's just this plume of smoke. And it's like, wow, so that sucks for someone. First gear, second gear, third gear. Go about a mile. Go up a hill. First gear, second gear, and I'm redlining the piss out of this engine. And I see the oil light start to flicker. And now I'm seeing, the smoke's following me. And I'm making about another quarter mile. I'm going down a hill, past the park with the engine off. I'm coasting down. I start cresting up the next hill, and I just got to get to the top, and then I can drop down, make a right, and I can get down my folks' house, and I can push the last little hill. I'm like, I know I can get out of the car and push it back to where it is, and they won't know. Fire the engine up, come up the hill, and the oil light's on. I'm like, there's nothing I can do. Nothing I can do. Shut it off. Coast as high up as I can. Set the parking brake. Get out. Okay, what's going on? Lift the deck lid, and it's just hot. And I start, I'm crouched down. I'm looking around for like what's causing this to, what's causing the smoke. I'm not seeing anything until I look down. My shoes are all oily, and it's the Exxon Valdez just coming down the hill onto my shoes. And I turn around, I look back, and I can see just this stream of oil.
Wow!
And no joking, dude. It went back 2 miles back to the bridge. Because
you bottomed it out.
I was supposed to be walking to school that week. I was walking to school the rest of that week. I lost one of those little acorn nuts, and then the stud for the oil strainer. At some point, it just dropped out, so it was just dumping oil onto the street until this little mishap.
Oh man, I used to have a dual quiet pack on my Beetle. I've had every single exhaust that was available at the time. I started with the pea shooters, and I remember buying extra long pipes from the VW shop. They were like 3 inches longer, so they went way past the bumper. I'm like, oh, that's pretty tough. I remember like, yeah, that's super cool. And then I saw the Monza muffler. I was like, oh man, I got to get a Monza. So I put the Monza muffler on. I love the look. I remember constantly looking for yellow tape so I could put the little defining line between the chrome and the black. Like, that was super important to me. I never thought once in my life to actually paint it. I just kept using this yellow tape that would melt eventually, and I just have to cut it a little bit thicker and thicker and thicker to cover the goo.
Those exhausts sound good too, man.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't like was the fact that you had the holes in the apron from the stock exhaust. I'm like, it's performance, but man, this thing's driving me nuts. Everybody's like, full filament. I'm like, are you crazy? Bondo doesn't work that good. It'll just fall right out, And then I got single quiet pack. I got the turbo tuck away. And this is all the cheapest empty stuff you could possibly buy. And at the time, I didn't know that they weren't painted black. They just had a rust inhibitor on them. So every muffler and header I ever bought turned bright orange within like a couple of weeks. And I had this itch. I really wanted dual quiet pack. And the only one they had in stock at Small Car at the time was for a Type 3. I said, it doesn't matter to me. And he's like, are you sure? Because the Volkswagen, it's got a curve in the back. And I said, Mario, come on, man. Just give me the Type 3. And he's like, okay. And I put it on, and it was awesome. It stuck out so far past the rear fenders. And, I mean, it was almost flush with the bumper. I'm like, that looks tough. That is awesome. But guess what? There's nothing supporting the dual quiet pack. I got 3 bolts and a flange holding all that weight.
And these stick out about 18 inches, 20 inches out both sides of this one flange held on with 3 bolts. This is a very heavy exhaust system held on at a center point, and you are supposed... Stockies are supposed to actually like use bang clamps and actually like clamp them onto the headers. Yeah,
there were spots on top of the muffler packs for hanging them, but I don't have a Type 3.
But you don't have the Type 3 header.
Yeah, I got
this Type 3 exhaust.
Nothing to hang it from, so I figure, hey, it's tough. Let's just do it. And I drove up to Porterville, way up north, and car ran great. I mean, it was what I did, you know. Hey, let's go. Let's take the car somewhere really far away. Came back, no problem. So let's go up there again. They're doing like a Ren fair. We'll go camping. Sounds like fun. Go out there, no problem. We're coming back, and it's like really late at night, and we're on the 101. And man, I tell you, all the worst stuff happens near home. When they say like, you know, so many accidents happen within so many miles of your house, there's like some truth to it. People are like driving up to me and trying to get my attention, and they're pointing to the back of my car. And I'm thinking, oh no, I'm not on fire again, right? It was pretty close. The muffler snapped and was literally hanging by a weld, bouncing around off the freeway, sparking. So I pull over, and I literally just kind of stepped on it a little bit, and it popped off. So now I sound like small aircraft with a single quiet pack on the driver's side of all places. I'm like, this is just so bizarre. Gotta go. Now I have a Stinger at home. No baffle. Wonderful thing. Neighbors love you for it. Animals love you for it. Police will seek you out for it. And I put that sucker on, and I'm like, I don't think I need a muffler anymore. I'm just going to do the Stinger thing. And I remember going out to meet, and everybody's like, dude, is that you? And I'm like, yeah, that's really loud. You can get a ticket? I'm like, nah, man. Cops respect this vehicle. It's tough. And they're like, dude, you know you're going to ruin your valves, right? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, cold air will go back in that thing and warp your valves, mess everything up. It's like, are these guys lying to me? I didn't believe them, so I just kept driving like that. And I drove home one day, and it was like a scene out of the Twilight Zone. My dad is standing in the middle of the street, and all the neighbors start coming out and joining him. Now I'm like, what is this? And I stop my car in the middle of the road, our street, and I get out, and my dad comes up to me. He's like, you stupid. They're going to call the police on you. I'm like, what did I do? Did I hit an animal or something? It's too loud. You come home 3 o'clock in the morning. And my dad, he talks like this. All I hear is, bum, 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 bum. They hear it too. Take it off. Like, all right, you got it. Started the car up, backed it up. They wouldn't get out of the street. You know, I just had to put my tail between my legs, go the other way. I went to small car and I bought the Mondo muffler, which is like the Fat Boy, except it's called the Mondo, and they were just coming out at this time. I'd seen them at the drag strip. Not too many people had them. Mm-hmm. Small car had two. They had the Mondo in black and the Mondo ceramic coated. I spent $200 on just the muffler. And I went home, and I kid you not, I didn't turn the corner. I got out of the car first to make sure everybody was gone, and I literally like drove it in second gear at idle, and I parked it in front of the house, and as soon as it cooled off, I went to work and put the Mondo muffler on, and it sounded fantastic. It was one of the best sounding exhausts I'd ever heard. And like to this day, like I still have that muffler. I think I've owned it for about 15 years. I ran it for about 3, and then when I just, well, now my timeline's off, but I ran it for a long time, and then when I finally decided to do the engine rebuild, I did not want to struggle with the weight of that Mondo muffler, like taking it and putting it on and taking it off, and if I had to call a tow truck, I would have to take the muffler off because flatbed comes out, that thing's getting pancake. Mm-hmm. So I bought the Jetpack, like the Tuckaway GT, which sounds like it has an amplifier in it, and I thought it looked great because it used the stock ports in the back for the exhaust, and it was loud and it was beautiful, but then I kind of I want to hear some music occasionally. I want to hear directions on my phone. I might want to call somebody in the club because their car might be on fire. Can't do it because all you hear is Mah! And my brother's like, your muffler's been sitting at my house for years. Do you want me to throw it away? And I'm like, no, keep it. It's like, dude, why don't you put it on your car? I'm like, I don't have headers anymore. So, like, last year he got me some headers. And he brings this huge, like, box, like, for an air conditioner, you know? And I was like, dude, what is that? It's like, your Christmas gift. I'm like, yeah, but it's just Christmas. Christmas is your birthday, not my birthday. Why do I get this huge box? He's like, just open it up. So I go to open up the box, and I can't move the box. It's like a brick. I'm like, what the hell? So I opened the box where it sat, and I saw pipes. And I pull out, 3/4 merged headers. I'm like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Well, why is the box so heavy? He's like, because your muffler's in there, too. And I was like, oh, okay, I gotcha. Cool, man. Put the headers back, drag it out to the backyard. I'll get to it tomorrow. So I make some time, and I pull the headers out, and I strip all the rust inhibitor off of them, and I get the high temp engine paint. I do it black, and I'm like, wow, these are looking great. I do like 3-4 coats. I want it to last. I don't want it to turn orange. I don't want it to discolor. But I think to myself, I better take a look at that muffler that's been sitting out in the backyard for like 8 years with grass growing on it. Mm-hmm. It looked like a coral reef, bro. It was not right. I mean, the ceramic coating was just kind of shot, but it did its job. The muffler did not rust to death. I don't know what's going on inside, but I was planning to see once I rev that sucker up to about 4.5. And luckily I didn't use all the paint, and I had to put a couple of coats on that guy. And then I go to install it, and guess what? This empty 3/4 merged exhaust doesn't want to work with this Mondo muffler that was on a racing merged exhaust, which has a longer taper, and the muffler was way further back from the car and the pipes. But you know what, man? I'm not putting the stinger on. I got to get this Mondo on there. So I had to take a block of wood and a really big hammer and start smashing the top of my muffler. Because, hey, I mean, it's like, it's garbage. I'm using garbage, but it's performance garbage. Let's make it fit.
Performance garbage.
Yeah, so I had it like hammered down.
I think that's the title of the episode.
A nice channel for it to ride up underneath the header now, because of the geometry of it. It was just touching in this one spot, and I had to mash it down 1.5 inches. And if I ever get like a racing merged exhaust, I could never use that muffler. It would look like somebody tried to kill it with a pickaxe or something, you know, like it was run over. But because of the way it tucks underneath the car, it's shiny and black, and it still sounds good. And who knows, maybe on the initial drive, I shot some baby possums out of it. So, you know, it's got blood sacrifice. It's, you know, it's been made. It's great stuff, you know. Who can say that about their Shelby Mustang, you know? They got the parts out of a box with silica to keep moisture out. I got my parts out of a backyard in Lancaster. They were abandoned. They were forgotten, and you just kind of dust them off and try it again. You know, there's very few parts I've ever thrown away from a Volkswagen. You know, you got 4 inches of wire? Oh, that goes over there, bro. You never know. You never know when you're going to need that. You got 17 sets of points. What are you going to do with all those? I don't know. But one day, you might need some points. I mean, it comes up.
The correct answer is I don't know yet.
You don't know yet. That's right.
Don't know yet.
I mean, like, I had the C-clip fall off of my clutch arm at the transmission at Van Nuys Courthouse during a rainy day during jury duty. I get in my car, I step on the clutch, and it hits the floor. And I'm like, oh my God, the cable's broken. But it's not. I go underneath the car, and it's just dangling there. I used Loctite to put it back on and hold it in place, and I forgot about it. I drove around with no retaining clip for like 5-6 years with just high strength Loctite holding that arm in place. And it wasn't until we were doing the rebuild where like my brother's like, you know, you're missing the clip here. And I was like, oh my God, that one time at jury duty, man. Yeah, I was in the puddle and it was raining, and yeah, I used the Loctite, and like that Loctite stayed in my toolbox for like well over a decade, almost 2 decades, and then finally like I saw it and I wanted to use it, and it was fused because I have a tackle box in my trunk that's got all these neat little metric tools and like little wrenches that have been grinded this way and that way and cut short so they fit here and fit there and do little tweaky jobs that need to be done occasionally, because whenever you notice a lack of performance, always check for a vacuum leak first. Vacuum leaks are just like easy fix, you know, gum, paste, whatever you can find, you know, stranded in the woods, mud, pine sap. What you got? You know, I heard you can use like vines from the rainforest as spark plug cables because they will conduct electricity.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, you can do all sorts of neat things. I mean, like, yeah, you just never know with the Volkswagen, man. Say, like, Volkswagen rebuild kit, and it's a picture of a rubber band, you know. It works. It comes in real handy. You never know.
So, do you have a truly crazy repair story?
Crazy repair story? Not necessarily. I mean, I've given you some of my better adventures with stuff coming off. The fires, the loose wheels. I will say, though, no, nothing too crazy, man. I mean, I did go on a driver's wanted cruise once, and we were doing back roads going out to Santa Clarita, and I had just gotten the EMPI electronic points, and everybody's like, my car wouldn't start. Oh, it's got to be the points, dude. It's got to be the EMPI makes junk stuff, you know? And I was like, oh, No, okay, well, guess what? I got points and condenser under my back seat. Let me swap it out. And everybody stayed with me for like an hour and a half because everything's piping hot. I'm like, dude, we gotta wait. You were putting like wet t-shirt or rags around the distributor to cool it down, and finally I'm just like, I can't do it. I gotta pull the distributor out. Here, let me scribe it so we can get the timing right again. And I take the electronic points out, which was easy. The hard part is getting the points in and the condenser and all the seals and the wires in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
And the car still won't start. And then we go back to the electronic points and the car still won't start. And then somebody's like, here, swap your internals with my internals. Like Jody, he was the vice president of the club at the time. We tore his distributor down to put the stuff in mine and my stuff in his. And guess what? His car started. And then my car started. So then we're like, okay, swapsies. Are we cool? Yeah, we're cool. We drive. And on the way back, my car breaks down again. This time, it's not getting fuel because the bake light swole up or whatever, and it just wasn't pumping. I mean, like...
yeah, like I said, I've been there.
Nothing too crazy, except for, like, I'm glad I had some people with me occasionally to give me options, to give me the opportunity to get out of there without having to call a mechanic, without having to call a tow truck. It's kind of like losing a match at that point. I mean, you can flip the car can burn, but if you can start it after the fact and get it home under its own power, that's a victory. You know what I mean? That's experience points earned right there. It's not like, I got the best car in the world. It's kind of like magic. It's just supernatural in some sense compared to what average people go through. I got to check engine light. I got to go to the mechanic. I got to go to the dealer. The littlest things trigger people. I need to see smoke. I need to see sparks. I need my equilibrium thrown off in some respect for me to go, oh yeah, we got a problem here. Or it's dead flat on its face, and that rarely happens. Because with the car as simple as a Volkswagen, even if it's a performance Volkswagen, you can troubleshoot it relatively quickly, in my opinion.
Oh, you absolutely can. That's not an opinion. That's a fact.
It's like, I don't have to worry about sensors. Relays are few and far between as far as a problem goes, because you can always drive your car when the sun comes up. It's what it comes down to. I love it to death, man. Even like if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would have to keep my car just the way it is and go buy a Porsche and something else to drive because it's so one of a kind. Like my buddy Jose, I call him McYellowbug because he's got a totally custom like 66 Beetle or 64, I don't remember. It's an even number year, and his car's tribute to Moon Eyes, and he's got these Boyd Coddington rims, or like 17s with super low profile tires, and 1.9 liter engine with dual 44s, and he's got the Bernie Bergman air cooling kit on it, with the what's called the DTF. I want to say it's DTF, but that means something completely different. And it's supposed to it's a doghouse with like 40% more cooling capacity, and it's got a Type 4 oil cooler.
Type 4 cooler.
And it's got that hose that runs around it. And he said, "Hey man, I was thinking the other day, I want to leave you my car in my will. Like if you outlive me or tragedy strikes, I want you to have my car." And I'm like, "That's pretty considerate of you." He's like, "What would you do to it?" And I'm like, "What?" He's like, if I gave you my car in my will and I'm dead, can't say anything about it, what would you do to my car? I'm like, "I would keep it exactly the way it is."
That car would have to stay the way it is.
And he's
that car's done.
And he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, because I hate it so much. I hate those rims. I hate the color. I mean, it's got some nice stuff, but there's so much about that car that I hate. I have to love it because Volkswagens are so diversified. You know, that car is you. I don't have to like everything about you, but I like you enough that you're my friend, and I'm not going to judge. You know what I mean? It's not my prerogative to right your wrongs or change anything about you, as long as there's a respect and a camaraderie there. So his Volkswagen is like the antithesis of anything I would ever want, if that's the right term. It's just the complete opposite of anything I would ever want Volkswagen. But if you gave it to me, I'd keep it.
It's a very shiny, very flashy show car.
Yeah.
It is the opposite of what you have. It is the opposite of what you've got.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I'd totally take it. It would have to be just one of those things, you know, you get that mystery Hot Wheels car, and it's like, man, it's not the one I wanted, but it's such a special edition. I just got to respect it. You got to keep it. I can't give it away. I can't change this. I can't change that. And like, you know, Hot Wheels is a good example because there's like almost no customization that you can do to a Hot Wheels car. I mean, you can't go into a toy store and buy rims for your Hot Wheels car. They're together. That's it. You know what I mean? You look at the back of the package and go, well, I can get this one that's the same car but a little different, but that's it. His car is like that. Like you said, it's done.
Yeah, there's nothing.
He's made a statement, you know.
that car is done. That's all that car is.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do to it.
No, I don't think, aside from passing it on to the tinier version of me, I really wouldn't do much to it, you know. It's just been this thing, and to say like, oh, I'm gonna have it restored now, would be like burying the past. You know, like some people get these barn finds, and they're like, oh my god, you know, there's a history here, and to sandblast it and redo everything isn't always the right decision. You know what I mean? It's like, especially if it's your story. I mean, if the car has some historical significance and it's a barn find, keep it rusty and crusty and, you know, tour it around the country. But for my million, I'm keeping that car the same. You know, I might upgrade the engine or whatever because we're just, you know, taking out the trash there and bringing in something new. But the car itself is, you know, very, very unique. People always say, like, is it a boy or a girl? And I'm like, it's an it. It's an it. I dubbed it the Buzz Bomb originally, based on the Dead Kennedy song, Buzz Bomb. I was like, oh yeah, that's an anthem for a Volkswagen, all right. You know, people see you driving in your car, driving fast, and it's like, yeah, that's a Buzz Bomb. Is that male or female? Is it a he or a she? It's an it, dude. It's totally an it. I can't say, you know, like, oh, it's more than love. It's just, now it's an extension of me. And like, I drive large vehicles for a living. People will see me in that Volkswagen, like coworkers are like, why are you driving that? Don't you like feel vulnerable in it? And I'm like, no, it's actually like when you get off work and you take your boots off and you put your flip-flops on and, you know, you can run around with no shirt on. That's me in a Volkswagen. It's totally free. I mean, it's not like 18 Wheels of Fury where you've got to calculate every turn. Volkswagen, you could slide into some stuff. You can slide out of some stuff. You can do things that, you know, most people wouldn't try to do with the car, you know. And every so often, like, I don't drive the car every day anymore. I drive it when I can, but at least every 2 weeks I start it up, I let it idle, I give it a little gas, and then I just floor it around every turn in my neighborhood. I look for gravel, I look for puddles, I look for anything that will give me prolonged loss of traction, so I can snake it around and, you know, just have fun with it, because it's not supposed to do that, but it does. And I did that. That's me. That's what I did, you know. And now and forever, it's done, you know.
I think this is the first interview I've had where I don't talk.
I wish I could just answer questions. It'd be so much easier because like people tell me like I don't know what you're talking about anymore, dude. You're just telling me things. I'm like,
I'm so on board with you. I'm back in Evelyn thinking about, oh yeah, that was a mistake. That roadside fix it's like, well, it didn't break getting home, so I'll try to get, if it doesn't break the next day, then I'll fix it later, and then 2 years go by, and it's like, well, I fixed it right the first time, I guess.
I have a video cassette, a VHS cassette that I started recording when I got my 69 Beetle. And you can see, like, everybody's young, everybody's kids, like, people that got Volkswagens didn't have bikes, you know what I mean? They're still riding their Strada scooters and stuff, and I listen to the things I say about the car and what I'm doing to the car. And there's a term for it now. It's called a noob. I was so noob with it that the things that I was enamored with were just trash. I mean, I don't think I watch it as an exercise in tolerance now because I was that bad about it, you know? And it goes from like the mid 90s and then it just jumps to 2000. And all of a sudden, like, my voice is deeper and I'm trying to be stylistic about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it and what my focus is on the car now. It's not these little tchotchkes that you can glue or stick onto the vehicle. It's like, this is what I'm going to do. Because I finally got the right Beetle. It's got the glass over the headlights, you know, they're recessed. It's got the oval taillights. It's got a long deck lid like it's supposed to. The bumpers are skinny and they don't have overriders. That's the way it's supposed to be. The front end is on the ground. And I swear to God, this car must have had a dozen owners before I got my hands on it because it had an adjustable front beam. It had a street tranny with a billet aluminum side cover. You know, it has a Neil gas pedal. Now, Neil was like off-road stuff back in the 70s, so who knows how many like real Volkswagen guys monkeyed around in this thing. You know, how did it lose its original doors? What the hell was this car going through up until the point I got it? So, you know, if you believe in energies, this car came with a lot of energies in it. I remember there's like a little dent on the doorpost on the inside of the driver's side, and my ex-girlfriend at the time was riding with me, and she's like, you know, this car creeps me out. I get a bad vibe in here. And I was like, yeah, you see that dent right there? She's like, yeah. Like somebody almost got shot in the head in this car. She's like, what? And I go, yeah, the bullet grazed their forehead, bounced off the doorpost right there. Didn't penetrate the metal, didn't penetrate their head. It was a good day. Are you kidding me? And I'm like, uh-huh, totally, just made it up. But you know what? The car might have been telling me something. I don't know, I wasn't there. But you never know what these things are, how they got there. You buy this old hunk of junk out of love, and, you know, the things you own eventually start to own you. Spend a lot of time. But now I got to the point where the work I've done is good enough. I don't really have to do anything except dust it off, check the oil, replace the battery, and add fuel. You know, my stereo hasn't worked in 2 years. Do I rush out and buy another one? I kind of want to listen to the motor these days, see if it's doing anything new, because I'm not driving it every day. When I was driving it every day, it was just a little bit different. Now it's just like, you know, everything comes to an end. The less I drive the car, the longer I'll have it. Because I'm not putting it in harm's way. Like, I'm a professional driver for a living. Every day I circumvent tens, if not hundreds of thousands of strangers in their motorized killing machines. And for every drifting lane and every occupied cell phone, you know, there's an opportunity for your classic vehicle to be destroyed. And I'm not saying this to keep you guys off the road, but be wary. You know, if you're going to drive that bad boy, have a mission. Be it complete nonsense, that's the best, because then you're actually working with chaos. If you have a purpose, then you're in danger. That's why so many people break down on cruises. Do a cruise, but don't tell yourself you're actually doing a cruise. I'm just going to follow these people. I don't know who they are. You say that subconsciously, you have no problem. But as soon as you start focusing on that car, saying, I got to keep up with these guys, it's over. It's over. Just kidding. So yeah. I mean, if we were going to talk about cars anymore, I would just have to play off what you're telling me. You know what I mean? Like, you start telling me some stories, and the memories will start coming back, you know? That's...
Well, we're actually right at 1 hour and 50 minutes.
Boom. Take that, Cliff. You inspired me, brother. Keeping it very weird. Yeah, that podcast is great.
The contrast between... See, this was when I started doing this podcast, I knew I had to get Cliff in. You know, we all know Cliff's getting up there in years. It's like I can't waste time. I have to get those stories.
He's immortal now,
and I have to do another episode with him because I know there's more stories. You know,
yeah,
you know what I mean. But the guy who's going to do this with me, Mark, he was like, "No, like you can't just all be Volkswagens. You know, he's a Toyota guy. He wants to get Toyotas in." And it's like, yeah, this isn't supposed to be a Volkswagen thing. It's supposed to be a let's talk shop for a couple hours.
Right.
But just in between you and me and Cliff and then Tony, I did an episode with him. He's got a diesel Rabbit. You know, but he's got a convertible Super Beetle, and he's got a bus. And it's like, so you have 4 samples of what this same air-cooled car is, and they're all totally different.
Right.
And the approaches to these cars are totally... Cliff's whole thing is like, no, it's got to be exactly the way that Herman the German made it.
Right.
You know, and then here you are talking, nah, man, it's performance garbage. I had to take a hammer to make this muffler fit because it sounded good.
You have to do that
that's
sometimes.
What I had to do.
I mean, look, man. If I had the means, I would be a different person. But my life has been somewhat of a struggle. I mean, I count my blessings. It's not been even remotely close to as bad as some people have had. But I grew up having to do things for myself. The idea of a repairman coming or taking your car to a mechanic did not exist in my household. Even if the job was done completely wrong, the job was somehow done. You know, it was so jury-rigged. But, I mean, I can revisit some of this stuff, like when I go to my parents' house, that has been functioning for over 3 decades. You know, and it's not done right, but it still works. You know, these patch jobs that my dad did on this or that, and then like patch jobs that I've seen on my car, because the alternative is so many painstaking steps, the use of so much specialized tooling and a specialized environment where you can dispose of this hazardous, you know, materials and paint products. I mean, if I can just take my oil to AutoZone and dump it there, that's cool. But when it comes to doing custom paint, using Krylon or Rust-Oleum in your front yard and waving at the mailman because you had to stop spray painting so you don't have to choke that dude out with your fumes, it's getting harder and harder. So, I mean, I've just done what I've done because that's like the pirate's life for me. You know what I mean? Like, you find some treasure, you take it, you use it. You don't bury it. I don't think any pirate ever buried any real treasure. They took it and they got some new gear. They got what they needed for the next trip, and that's it. I mean, you're living every day on this edge. You know, every knife is pointed at you, every musket is pointed at you, every sword, every cutlass. You're a marked person. And when you're driving an old Volkswagen, wouldn't it be better to get away a little quicker? That's just my opinion. I can't do complete NOS restoration. It's just not there for me. And even if I bought one like completely restored, I don't know. I would like to just have the opportunity to drive. Like if somebody had a Type 34, like a Razor, I would drive their car and say, wow, that's a beautiful car. Now if I got one, bro, what can we do that's bigger than 2 liter? Can we do something? Can we put a Subaru motor back there? What do you want to do?
Oof.
You know, because that would be more affordable than putting, you know, a flat 6 and a Porsche 5-speed or something, you know, comparable. I would love to do that, but hey, you know what? If I got a Type 34 Razor, it would have to be pretty cheap. You know what I mean? And the build to get that crazy horsepower, I'd have to talk to my brother about. And this cat, he'll source it out, and it won't be Volkswagen because he's done the Volkswagen thing. And for the money, you can go almost any other power plant. And, you know, it's not purist, but...
Well, because, yeah, without getting into your brother and his cars,
right.
The Turbo 13B Mazda rotary all tucked underneath the deck lid so that you didn't know that was a work of art.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what he does now because he got rid of that car, and that means he's not in the club anymore. So let's see what happens, man.
He's in the 6-cylinder Ford.
Well, look,
Ford
he's
Falcon Club now.
He's got a Rabbit, and his wife's got the Cabrio. But that just makes him water cooled, man. You know, like I can appreciate it. I wanted a Corrado, I wanted a Sirocco, but I'm air cooled, man. Like he told me so many times, when are we gonna turbo your car? When are we gonna do this? And I'm like, I like the way the Weber carburetor looks so much that I won't do it. He's like, what? We could put a side draft. I go, no. Weber IDA and IDF upright carburetors are beautiful. And I would love to have 2, but I'm not chopping holes in the side of my car right now to be able to adjust them. And with the 1600, I only need 1, and it's looking at me every time, and I see that Weber stamp on there. And, you know, mine are made in Spain, which is A-okay with me because they don't say China, okay? I have very few parts that say China, and if I do have parts that say China, they're well hidden. You know what I mean? I go out of my way to scratch that little gold sticker off whenever I buy those parts. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's the life, man. That's the life. Short and fast, just like the car.
So I'm gonna load the final question I give everyone. I give everyone what would you do? You know, so if someone wanted to get into whatever you're driving, what would you tell them? But your car's going to your daughter, right?
Mm-hmm. What would I tell them?
If you had to give her one piece of advice to keep that car around, to keep that car alive forever.
The Samba. That's it. The Samba. You're gonna do it yourself, and if you can't, just still don't sell it. You know what I mean? I would love for her to be able to drive it and do the work and stuff like that. But honestly, like when you started the question, I would just say don't push the clutch pedal. Don't push the clutch all the way down, because I have it set up that you don't have to press the clutch all the way down to engage the clutch. I like just kind of slapping it a little bit. Yeah, you know. I used to make the joke, this car can never be valeted. They will mess up everything. Only me and my brother can drive it, because he'll step on it and go, dude, your clutch is tight, without even doing the full depression, you know? I'm like, I know, that's the way I like it. Don't let anybody park this car. I go, I know. I don't ever plan on it, you know? It's just one of those things, like, I disconnect my battery cable. Always, because number one, it's a theft deterrent. Number two, it keeps the battery from discharging, right? Strange things. very special to the car. So yeah, I guess, if there's any advice I'd give my daughter to keep the car running and to hold possession on it is just you make up a good reason. Whether it's remembering the times we used to slide sideways around the corner and not wear seatbelts and all that good stuff. Do it for that. Because I embarked on this journey out of loss. I didn't have to lose a family member. In fact, I never even got the damn car. I had to go out and start this whole struggle on my own, and it affected my brother, who got seriously into Volkswagens. He didn't do it because my mom had the car. He did it because I was doing it. I inspired like a good handful of people, and 2 of them still have Volkswagens. Out of 5 people, 2 of them still have Volkswagens. Jarrett's one of them. That cat's gone through a couple. You asked Jarrett when he was a youngster what car he was going to drive. My stepdad's 64 Mustang. Stick. It's right there on the side of the yard. We went there, scooped turds out of it. We thought there was like a cable that had broken off. It was a rat's tail, dude, and the rat was still attached to it. I mean, it weighed absolutely nothing. It was mummified and dried. But he was a Mustang guy. In fact, his stepdad sold that car. He went and got a Mustang. And then after that Mustang was gone, he got a Bug. And he was with us. And now he's got another Bug. He's still with us. We're older now. We don't have that kind of time to just hang out all day and all night and shoot the breeze, and hang out. It's like we have to make time now. We're all responsible adults, and we have to take care of other humans. It's a good time, and we make time for that special thing called Volkswagens.
Well, on that note, Marcos.
Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. It's a pleasure, man.